you all very much for tuning in to episode 8 of Pushing the Pylon. This is your host, Jim Tannhauser, and I will not for 1 second pretend that there's a bigger news story on my mind in the world of football than that the Jacksonville Jaguars finally won a football game. If you can't tell, I'm extremely happy about it. Yes, I'm going to overreact extremely to one win in the regular season against a team who is also not very good. I'm going to overreact to that a lot. And guess what? Spoiler alert, I normally have a nice, long written script for these podcasts. I didn't even bother. I knew that the time of this podcast would be filled up mostly by me talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars. If you're a Colts fan, if you're a Titans fan, if you're a Texans fan, you may not want to watch this episode or listen to this episode. It's going to get incredibly biased. It's going to get incredibly celebratory, and it's going to be very overreactive. But guess what? The Jaguars finally won a game. You can't tell me a damn thing. For those of you watching the video form of this one, hello, how you doing? Second of all, you may wonder why my hat's backwards right now. It's a Jaguars hat. As much as I want to show off the logo, look what happens on camera. The green screen just does not cooperate with that logo very well at all. So I could do the episode like this and have a little distracting up top where you're seeing through my hat. So we're going to turn it this way because we don't want you, the viewer, distracted by anything besides us talking about football, especially in episode 8, where the Jacksonville Jaguars finally won a football game. Now, if your mic or your headset speaker somehow cut out in these last 2 minutes, and you didn't know, the Jaguars played in London this week. They played the Miami Dolphins, who were 1-4 coming in, 1-4 coming into today, playing the 0-5 Jacksonville Jaguars. First half of that game was going exactly how everyone probably expected. The Miami Dolphins came out firing. They came out hot. And by halftime, it was looking like it was going to be a shutout for the Dolphins. Potentially. Meanwhile, it was... So you had 13-3. Excuse me on the shutout. Clearly, I'm excited right now. 13-3. Right down the wire coming to halftime with less than a minute left. This young man, Trevor, the second coming of Elway, Lawrence, throws a beautiful 28-yard pass to Marvin Jones Jr., to which I could only describe as a miracle. Because that touchdown shouldn't have happened. It was an improbable catch over very good defense that was just fantastically executed. Made it 13-10 going into halftime. Now all of a sudden, it's a manageable game. Then, the Jaguars come out in the third quarter, hold the Dolphins to 0 points, the same amount of points the Jaguars had wins in that same third quarter, and then they score a touchdown to go up by 4. So, oh my God, can this happen? I'm sitting there, maybe, probably not. I've seen 2 or 3 blown leads this year by this team, but of course, I'm a fan. My heart's still there. I'm pulling for these guys, right? And then they can't get a stop, for one, which is the same problem as they've had all season. They can hold a team to third down. They are so bad at holding a team to fourth down, however. And it showed. Jalen Waddle ended up catching his second touchdown of the game in the fourth quarter. Put the Dolphins up 3. And you're sitting there like... I've seen this story way too many times as a Jaguars fan. You know what I mean? Either the Jags are going to come down and lose last second, or they're just going to give up 21 unanswered points somehow in a 5-minute span. This game's going to look like a blowout. That didn't happen, however. The Jaguars go out and try a 54-yard field goal. Sadie trying to make a guest appearance on this podcast. Think she's good? Think she's good. So, they send out their field goal kicker, a 54-yard attempt. To which, if you watch this year, the only thing more non-existent in Jacksonville than winning this year was field goal kicking. The only team in the NFL to have not made a single field goal this season coming into London. That streak broke in the first quarter. However, This kick, if you didn't see it live, or didn't see the replays of it, this ball must have been a miss by a good 5 feet to the right. Easily missed. The second it's off the foot, in the air, I said, wow, terrible attempt. Should just went further on fourth. It's not going in. All of a sudden, I don't know if it's because they were across the pond in Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, in a Premier League stadium, but this ball bent like Beckham. Curves to the left, goes through the uprights, barely through the uprights. This field goal may have not been good from 55, but since it was 54, he nailed it. Ties the game at 20. Beautiful, beautiful execution. Then the Jaguars finally get their stop on defense. And this is the time you're sitting there saying, oh my God, can the Jacksonville Jaguars actually do it? Can they actually do it? And the drive didn't look that good. They were barely in field goal range. So the Jaguars said, we'll try a Hail Mary, right? They're all lined up for the Hail Mary, ready to go. And I'm sitting there saying, well, it's going to be a loft into the crowd, or into the end zone, maybe into the crowd, who knows. But probably just going to overtime. You know, these two bad teams in the AFC are going to battle it out for a potential tie. And I'm going to be disappointed by 115 at that time. You know, that's what I figured. No. 53-yard field goal, because instead of a Hail Mary, the Jaguars run a beautiful route, which puts them about 10 yards forward, lets them stop the clock with 1 second left, just in time for Matthew Wright to come in and nail a 53-yard field goal. So a team who had 0 field goals coming into this week ended up getting 40, 54, and 53-yard field goals. Now, if that isn't something that could have only happened in London, you know, I don't know what is. And the Jaguars win 23-20 ultimately. Trevor Lawrence, over 300 yards, completed over 50% of his passes, no turnovers. That's an excellent game from a rookie Trevor Lawrence. I know all of you, based on the hype, a lot of you, expect Trevor Lawrence to be this dominant rookie, winning 6 to 8 games for the Jaguars. Hell, I even thought that a little bit. But then, you know, logic and reasoning come in, and you think, man, this guy got handed the worst team in the NFL. He gets handed a coach who has never coached in the NFL. And on top of that, gets himself involved in all these scandals to where he went from being the coach to the biggest distraction the Jaguars franchise has had since, I don't know, you want to say Telvin Smith? You want to say, you know, the list goes on about Jaguars who have taken away from the main goal of making the football team prestigious and winning games. And Trevor Lawrence steps in and does beautifully. He utilizes Marvin Jones Jr. when DJ Chark's out for the season. He utilizes James Robinson finally. That's more shout out to Urban Meyer. I'll give him credit for that. 17 carries from James Robinson. You're going to be in a game every time with that. I truly believe James Robinson is the type of running back that you can rely on throughout the season. You know, I would have loved a big name in the backfield, you know, but James Robinson proved last year he can do it when he wasn't given the proper training camp, expected to be, you know, the main running back. He was the guy there, but most people thought the Jags would go out and get a running back or trade for one or give him at least something complimentary. He became the bell cow. He dominated. He succeeded. And this year he's getting that chance more than he should have. Probably ETN would have taken up some of those carries and time on the field, but James Robinson's making the most of it. I'm very happy about that. The defense, I mean, you held the Dolphins to 20 points. It's great. There's a graphic that came up during the game that the Jaguars are in the top 5 teams in history for the most consecutive games of allowing 20 points or more. It's something like the record's 3 years long from the old Packers in the 50s or something. But the defense in terms of individual performances, I mean, you had Josh Allen coming up with big plays, finally being that guy who is just a force where it's taking up at least an offensive lineman or two to completely contain him. The stuff you kind of see with the Watt brothers of the world and, you know, any elite pass rusher, you should be getting that type of attention. Josh Allen's finally getting it. Credit to him for that. Shaq Quarterman stepping right in for an injured Miles Jack and playing well. I mean, here he only had one tackle, it said, but he was present. His presence on the field was definitely known. You know, if I'm not mistaken, LSU product, I believe, Shaquille Quarterman. When he was drafted, it was just like kind of one of those late third day draft picks where it's like, maybe he contributes. He's a good name from a good school, but he's come in, stepped in, you know, to his own right and taken over for Miles Jack. Now, will that be the long-term answer? Absolutely not. Miles Jack will be back, despite all of the critics in Jaguars media who talk about how he, you know, the Jags do better when he's off the field and he is always in pass coverage and shouldn't be. I get it, but Miles Jack's one of the better linebackers in the league. You're obviously putting him back there when he's healthy. But in the meantime, Shaquille Quarterman is doing a great job. Now, when I said, now looking at this, I'm kind of remembering the game. It was 9:30. All right, give me a break. I'm not used to watching football at 9 in the morning. Trevor Lawrence did fumble and lose the ball during the game, so he did have a turnover. But interception-wise, no interceptions. That's what we love to see. And I believe that fumble may have been caused by Christian Wilkins, his former teammate. Could be wrong on that, but he was definitely involved in the play. Because I remember the broken record announcers, Clemson. Back when I hated Trevor Lawrence, that is a whole different Trevor Lawrence from what we have now. We love Trevor Lawrence. We stan him now. He's our king. He's our savior. And one day he will be our Super Bowl MVP. I told you there were going to be overreactions coming. Be ready for them. They're still coming. Because if the Titans were to lose tonight, which, spoiler alert, they didn't. They had a very gutsy performance against the Bills with some questionable play calls at the end. We'll talk about that after. But the Jaguars could have been 2 games out of first place. Now, being the second to last team to win a game in the league, to being 2 games away from first is quite the accomplishment. Even now, being 3 games out, pretty surprising, you know. There's another 1-5 team, the Texans, right there with the Jaguars. The Colts are 2-4 right above them. It's a very young season, and I understand that, you know, odds are Jacksonville goes and loses half of their games to 3/4 of their games left. I get it. I'm prepared to be disappointed. However, anything is possible, and we're going to be optimistic about it because Jacksonville now has a bye week. They get to rest up, keep Urban Meyer locked in a room. Don't give him the key. No visitors allowed. No social media or pictures allowed. And you make him sit in there until you have to go to Seattle. That is who the Jaguars play after the bye week. If Geno Smith's still the quarterback there, which I'm 95% sure he will be, no way Russell Wilson makes it back in time for that game. The Jaguars have no excuses. They should be able to come into that game with momentum and at the very least compete with a team who is hunting for the playoffs. And I don't know if Seattle will make the playoffs this year, especially with Russell Wilson out, especially if they're in the hardest division in football now. They're looking at games like the Jaguars and saying, okay, those are the wins that like we expect, that we're hoping, you know, are easy. And those are the games that Jacksonville should be looking at and saying, that's one we can take. We can certainly take Seattle on the road after the momentum of London. It won't be easy, it won't be fun, and there's going to be a lot of mistakes along the way trying to cover DK Metcalf. I'm already seeing Metcalf go for 135 yards and a pair of touchdowns, or Lockett, one of them. I'm just saying Metcalf because he's the freak of nature, and the Jaguars don't know how to cover freaks of nature unless it's Rob Gronkowski in the AFC Championship. I digress. But Jacksonville Jaguars in London may be the new move. Petition to move half our home games to London. Keep half in Jacksonville. You know, we respect Duval. Got to keep in Duval. Got to keep the culture. But I kind of want a few wins in seasons. You know, and London might be the cheat code for that. Trevor Lawrence, first rookie quarterback to ever win in London. That's a stat. I mean, I think only 4 or 5 rookie quarterbacks have ever played in London. But Trevor Lawrence is the first one. And that's a good first one. Who cares who the next one is? Who cares who the last one is? They'll remember who the first one was. And it was Trevor Lawrence. Well, that was a big chunk of our Pushing the Pylon episode on the Jaguars. I feel like the rest of you fans out there would like to hear more about other teams. But I don't know when the win's going to come again. So we're going to celebrate this Jaguars win while we have it. Maybe another celebratory episode down the road. But for now, we'll take this one. And we'll be happy about it. Jaguars finally get a win. Monkey off their back. Looking to start a winning streak. In terms of the other games this week, the biggest surprise, at least in the early games for me, was the Ravens beating the Chargers. I had picked the Ravens over the Chargers. If you follow us on Facebook or Twitter, I do post Sunday picks. And it was a shocker to see the Ravens win. I picked them thinking that it went against my logic, which you know, when you do that, when you talk about Vegas lines and spreads, you think about, why does this say in that case there was a 3-point spread for the Ravens? Now, as good as the Chargers have been this year, why would you think the Ravens are favored by 3? It looks so suspicious to me that I figured they know something I didn't, that would be a trap game. I picked Baltimore, and 34-6 later, trap game indeed. Now, I don't think this makes the Chargers a team that people should be canceling in terms of contendership. They're very much a contender. They're very much still one of the best teams in the NFL. But they went against the Baltimore Ravens, who are becoming also one of the best teams in the NFL, if they weren't already. Very sneaky elite team in the AFC. Everyone's going to talk about the Bills, who lost tonight, by the way, so the Ravens now have a better record than them. But anyway, they're going to be talking about the Chargers, who the Ravens just beat, but we won't talk about that anyway. You're going to also have the Chiefs in there, even though they got their win this week. It was against Washington, but they're back. They're finally, not under 500. But the Chargers, why can't you say they're as good as the Chiefs? It's tough. I understand most of us know where the Chiefs will probably end up this year is back to that upper echelon where we're saying Patrick Mahomes is a cheat code and unstoppable. But for now, even when the Chargers lose to the Ravens, they shouldn't fear the Chiefs at all. They played a very good game against them, early on. And yeah, it's just one of those games where, any team doesn't go undefeated. So eventually they have to lose once or twice or a few games. And this is just one of those games. This is one of those games where if the Ravens and Chargers play in the playoffs, they'll reference this game and they'll act like it matters. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter at all. Maybe a little psychological advantage. But, I mean, if you look at the quarterback stats, if I completely disregard rushing, one may have an argument that Justin Herbert still played better than Lamar Jackson. I mean, they're very similar, so I wouldn't say either played great. But the passing yards, 195 to 167 in favor of Justin Herbert. Both have a touchdown. Lamar Jackson threw 2 interceptions. Justin Herbert threw 1. Lamar Jackson got sacked 3 times. Justin Herbert 2. But the QBR is probably where this differs a little bit, because when you incorporate all of the rushing, the passing, efficiency, Lamar Jackson's QBR is a good 50 points higher than Justin Herbert's, hence a 34-6 final. Baltimore Ravens, though, don't sleep on John Harbaugh being a Coach of the Year candidate. I said at the start of the year, I think he's a great dark horse to win Coach of the Year. I believe he was at 12-1 odds anywhere you looked. He is quickly becoming a Coach of the Year contender, especially with the Ravens playing the way they are. Now, one stat I want to pull up for you here to kind of vouch for John Harbaugh and his potential Coach of the Year campaign, if I can find it, is right here. So the top 2 teams, there are 2 teams that lead the league in players on injured reserve. You have the Lions that have 14 players on IR, and you have the Baltimore Ravens, who have 16 players on IR. Now tell me the difference between the Lions and Ravens this year. I'll give you a hint. Look at their records. Lions 0-6 with 14 players on the IR. 0-6. The Ravens have 2 extra players on the IR. 16 players. And they're 5-1. As this tweet said, shout out to @Paul Hembo. John Harbaugh is a good football coach. His brother may not be as good of a football coach, but John Harbaugh is a good football coach. Look out for him as a future Coach of the Year candidate, if I can have it my way. Moving on to the 4 o'clock games, this is where you have more of the excitement for this past week. The Cardinals just absolutely stomping on the Browns, which that was another one. Browns were favorites this game. Now, looking back at it, you may say that's stupid. You know, we all knew the Cardinals were going to win. But why were the Browns favorite? One of those things where do the odds makers know more than we do? I fell in the trap. I took Cleveland. Deservedly lost the game there. Kyler Murray, future MVP, whether it's this year or a future year, that man's going to have an MVP or 2 or 3 in his trophy room. Raiders beating the Broncos by 10, and I don't even think it was that close of a game. Raiders dominated the Broncos with an interim head coach, with all the John Gruden stuff, you know, in their way. I didn't talk about that on the last podcast when it was more relevant about John Gruden. Let me just say this. Anyone, including John Gruden, who holds the opinions that he does and sincerely means it in a professional setting or any setting of the such, get them out of here. I don't want to hear from them. I don't want to support them. I don't want to watch a product that they are a part of or get paid by. Shame on John Gruden. And kudos to everybody in the league, including the Raiders, who took the correct action to get him out. I don't know how publicly known a lot of these feelings were about John Gruden, to where did the Raiders hire him when they knew he was like this? I don't know. I guess I just have to give him credit now for getting rid of him, because, you know, there's no room for that in the NFL. Especially when, you know, some of the comments he made were homophobic, and you have a player on your team who is the first openly gay player in the NFL. It's just not going to work. And that's not to say it matters who's on his team orientation-wise. I don't care if he had a team full of 52 straight men who have no way of being discriminated against. There should be no tolerance for those opinions, especially in an email like that where the evidence is so clear. It's not hearsay. He's literally signed his name to it, you know, whether it was electronically or literally. John Gruden's got to go. Get him. Madden's getting him out of the game. I think the Buccaneers are getting him out of their Ring of Honor for, like, their great players of the franchise, or coaches in that case. It's just an ugly, ugly situation. I didn't even want to take a part of this podcast, but it plays to the point that the Raiders, despite all of that nonsense in terms of media parade in their probably locker rooms, practice fields, you name it, they come out and win against a division opponent on the road in Denver, which is a very hard place to play and win. So kudos to the Raiders. They're showing people that they didn't need John Gruden, whether it was for 1 year or 10 years or 100. They didn't need him for one. Cowboys beat the Patriots in overtime, which may have not been a surprise, but what the surprise would be is that the Patriots kept it as close as they did. A lot of nonsense at the end of the game in terms of pick six, blown coverage to make the score really high scoring. But it was a solidly played defensive game for most of it. The score is a little deceiving there. What about Dak Prescott, though? 445 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. I get that most people think he's a lock for comeback player of the year. He's got to be in the MVP discussion, especially if the Cowboys go and become a number 1 seed in the NFC. There's just no question there. When Ezekiel Elliott only runs for 69 yards and Tony Pollard only runs for 41 yards, and you still win a game against the Patriots on the road and you throw for 60, you're about 55 yards away from 500, you should be in the MVP conversation, especially in a week where a guy like Justin Herbert takes a step back, in a week where I want to say Josh Allen takes a step back for losing, but he still had a really good game. Point being, Dak should be in the conversation, along with who we talked about earlier, Lamar Jackson. How can you have an MVP discussion without those two guys in it? You shouldn't. It's not a good one to have. Leading receiver for the Patriots, by the way, anyone know? It's Kendrick Bourne, who only had one catch, but it was that 75-yard touchdown in blown coverage. Trayvon Diggs keeps his interception streak alive. Stephon Diggs caught a ball, at least one tonight. I believe there's a touchdown and multiple catches beyond that. But the streak is alive. The Diggs brothers have caught a pass every single week of this season. And that's... people don't realize how crazy that is. That one of the brothers is a defensive back. And that streak's continuing through 7 weeks of football. It will end with this week when Trayvon Diggs is on a bye week. But who knows? It might continue into the next week. And then you had Sunday Night Football. Complete trap game in every sense of the word. Trap enough for your boy here, Jim, to pick the Steelers. -5. They win by 3 in overtime. Of course they do. Weird game. I don't really know how to assess the game other than that it was ugly. Doesn't mean some players didn't play well. You know, Alex Collins had a real good game. Najee Harris had a real good game. But 23-20 overtime game on a game-winning field goal. Boring Sunday night game. Most people were watching the Braves and Dodgers at the end. I know this isn't a baseball podcast, but I'd be lying if I wasn't saying that the baseball game wasn't on the big screen and I had the football game on the laptop. I'm sorry. I'll never not watch the game. I got to do my homework for y'all and myself, but that NLCS was extremely exciting. ALCS, on the other hand, the Red Sox are just goats, filming this right after a 12-3 victory for Game 3 Monday night. But I digress. Back to football. Titans tonight, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, really gutsy win against the Bills. They instantly launched themselves back into the AFC playoff picture in a division that's very shaky. When your top rivals, the Colts, Titans shouldn't be sweating that too much right now unless the Jaguars want to go make the improbable run that I'm half jokingly, half biasedly serious about. We'll see. But big win for the Titans tonight. I don't know if I like the call with the Bills going for it on 4th and 1 at the end. They could have just kicked a field goal to tie it and force overtime. But it's one of those plays. If the Bills go and get it and then win the game, Sean McDermott's a genius. Josh Allen's a GOAT. But they didn't get it. So now everyone's questioning Sean McDermott, and everyone's going to forget about Josh Allen in the MVP discussion. One thing about that, though, is some of you are going to laugh about this, but I recommend that you go out and watch this video where Nick Wright on ESPN makes a case. Nick Wright on ESPN. Actually, that's not true. He's on FS1 or Fox Sports, whatever it is. Anyway, Nick Wright. I sure just said the name. Had a whole thing about how Josh Allen really shouldn't be this big MVP candidate for people because every major quarterback this year, including Patrick Mahomes, if you exclude his record, has a better resume for MVP this year or an identical resume to Josh Allen. So a game like tonight where you lose to the Titans isn't going to help your case, even though you throw for 353 yards, 1 touchdown, or 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, and you run for 10 carries, 26 yards. I mean, the average on carries isn't great, but if you're rushing 10 times a game as a quarterback and you're throwing for 350 and you're 3-to-1 ratio for touchdowns to picks, you're valuable in every sense of the word. Now, most valuable, I don't know, but valuable, definitely most valuable on the Bills. No one's arguing that. Now looking at week 7 for football. You got a few rivalry games in here. Now, that's not to say they're guaranteed, great games. But you have, like, the Jets and Patriots. That's always a fun one. Something stupid always happens in those games. Whether it's an icy ghost comment or Mark Sanchez winning a football game. It's just the stupid things happen in Jets-Patriots sometimes. You have the Falcons-Dolphins. You have the winners of London going against the losers of London in a head-to-head duel. Now, I was, before I go into the other games, I was debating about giving out my sports picks for the week on here, but I don't want to do that because the lines change so much. Injuries happen, injuries occur. I didn't really want to do that in case things got really drastic. But I will say that I do think the Falcons pull that game out. They're favorites. No, I'm not saying anything crazy, but I think you can rely on me taking the Falcons, barring any crazy information coming out. You have the Bengals-Ravens, once a hard-hitting NFC North matchup or AFC North matchup. Now, I mean, the Bengals are 4-2. They're very, very impressive in terms of where people expect them to be. Do I think they go on the road and beat Baltimore in Baltimore? I don't think so. I think the 6.5 line there is good for Baltimore. We'll see, though. Because, again, divisional rivalry, anything can happen. Close games can definitely occur. Game of the week, though, for me, would have to be Monday night. You have the Saints and Seahawks in Seattle. Saints potential revenge game for the Beastquake of Marshawn Lynch. I almost said a few years ago. It's about a decade now, almost. But the Saints are favored that game, which I know a lot of people might bat their eye at, but the Saints deserve that. They deserve to be favorites that game. Seattle has shown nothing to make me think they're better than the Saints, especially if Chris Carson's going to be out still, which he will. He's on the IR. Do the Saints get Michael Thomas back? Do the Saints get Will Lutz back, their kicker? That was somebody I've heard came off the IR. He could be good to play for this game. If they get him and Michael Thomas, Saints by 5 is looking generous, and that spread's going to change very quickly. And for Thursday night's game, I'm not giving away any spoilers. Yeah, you're going to have to watch TikTok or Facebook. I put up the videos of my predictions. If you're not following already, make sure to follow Hauser Media on TikTok or follow the Pushing the Pylon page on Facebook. You'll see our predictions every Thursday. Before this week, we were undefeated on Thursday Night Football, and it took the Eagles to go for 2 when they didn't have to, and it took Brady to kneel the ball on the 6-yard line, wherever it was, to lose by a half point or full point. It was a full point because it was Bucks -7, and they won by 6. If that's my bad loss of the year, so be it. 1 point off. But anyway, leading into the conversation of this week's game, Broncos at Browns, which the Browns are very banged up right now. I mean, Baker Mayfield came into the game and finished it yesterday, but he was in a sling after the game. His shoulder's clearly not right, or something in this area. He landed on it terribly in the second half, I should say, of the Browns game this Sunday against the Cardinals. Kareem Hunt's out multiple weeks. Nick Chubb was out last week. Who's to say he comes back on a short week like this? And then what the name is of, I'm trying to think of his name here, Jonathan. I always just it's J-K-O-J-O-K. I gotta get his name now. Bear with me. Got you right here. It's Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. In real time, you're watching me try to pronounce Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. It's not that hard, I guess. I just didn't know how to pronounce it. But he's probably not going to play if it hasn't already been confirmed yet. Big losses for the Broncos. I mean, for the Browns, to where the Broncos, coming off of a loss, could see momentum there. Yes, they're on the road. Yes, they have to go to the dog pound in Cleveland. But who's to say they can't pull that out? It's going to be tough. The Browns are still favorites despite all those injuries. So clearly, the odds makers don't think those injuries are going to play a huge part. But we'll see. And make sure to tune in for that prediction on Thursday. I think it's time for a little hit or stand. Our running series on Pushing the Pylon, where we bring up a certain topic or debate in football. We say hit or we say stand. Hit means keep going, I don't like it, improve on it. Stand means I like it, I'm good where I am, that's a good take. Today's edition is going to be the last place teams in every division. We're going to go through the worst team in each division, and we're going to talk about whether or not we think they have a shot to change their fate. Will they be in the basement all season? Will they be out of it by the end of the year? We'll start off in the AFC East. The last place team is the Miami Dolphins, 1-5. Jets are 1-4, but in the loss column, the Dolphins are technically the last place team. I will say hit. I don't think the Dolphins finish as the worst team in that division. I do think the Jets will. So I guess it would be a stand if you want to say the Jets are the worst team there, but standings-wise, the Dolphins are there. And I don't think they're going to be there. I believe they will be a second or third place team in that division. The way it's looking, it might be a third place team, even though they beat New England. That's their only win this year. Jets, I think, are much worse. Jets finished last in the AFC East this season. NFC North, you have a tie. You have the Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers, both 3-3. Do I think either one of those teams will finish in the basement this season? I'm going to say hit. I don't think either will. I think the Bengals might fall back a little bit. But if I'm going to pick one of those two teams, Pittsburgh or Cleveland, it's looking like Pittsburgh might be that team, because even though they have the players, they have the personnel, that receiving core is so criminally inconsistent. And whether that's Big Ben's fault, the play caller's fault, or the receiver's fault, I don't know for sure. But I definitely wouldn't want my chips on the table to be on Pittsburgh at this point. Very scary. Baltimore is running away with that division. Even though they're only a game ahead of Cincy, it's probably going to be 2 after this week, I would guess. I'm going to say the current team there right now, because of tiebreakers, the Cleveland Browns, I say will not finish last. Hit. AFC South, the Jacksonville Jaguars are 1-5. They're tied with the Texans. Texans have the tiebreaker since their one win came to Jacksonville in week 1. Bias time, overreaction time, hit is not a way the Jaguars finish last place in that division. The Houston Texans are going to be last place in the AFC South. Book it. Trevor Lawrence is going to make us be a third place team, or delete this clip from existing on the internet. I still, and yes, this is my bias coming in, I don't see why people would think the Texans are a better team than the Jaguars. Even though the Jaguars had a worse record than them all up until 1 o'clock yesterday. The Jaguars have competed in some good games, like against the Cardinals, for example. The Texans' big game was against the Patriots, where they had the lead and blew it, which the Patriots 2-4. I mean, it's not as impressive. I'm going to say the Texans finished last place in the AFC South. And I know there's some people out there who may think that as well, who aren't necessarily Jaguars fans. Though a lot of you are probably disagreeing with me on that. We'll see. AFC West, this is a fun one. The Denver Broncos are tied with the Chiefs for last place. Now, I don't think there's a way on the green earth that we stand on tonight that the Chiefs finish last place in the AFC West. I don't think there's a way they possibly do that. The Broncos could. They're tied for last place with the Chiefs. I even think the Raiders could have a fallback. The Chargers probably won't. The Chargers are going to be first or second. But we're going to have another hit. The Chiefs will not finish last place in that division. Then we're getting to the NFC East. The New York Giants, 1-5. I'm sorry, Nathan. My good friend out there. One of my best friends to watch football with every Sunday. Loyal Giants fan. May be a loyal Jaguars fan by the end of the season, but a loyal Giants fan. Watches the games. Deals with all their troubleness just like I deal with Jacksonville's. I'm sorry, my friend. I'm going to say stand. This is my first stand of the hit or stand. The New York Giants will finish last place in the NFC East. I don't think the Eagles are good. I don't think Washington's good. I just think the Giants are worse. And healthy, that's probably not the case. I think they're a better team than they are if healthy. But the fact is they're not healthy. Their receiving core is borderline non-existent. It's been their problem the past few seasons. It's also a problem with their last few seasons. Saquon Barkley can't stay healthy. It's a damn shame. Any fan of football should be sickened by that because Saquon Barkley is just a complete animal, complete game changer. Would have defined this generation of running backs if he stayed healthy and dominated like a Derrick Henry, like an Ezekiel Elliott. Nick Chubb becoming one of those guys now. Just really sad. But for now, in the short term, I don't think the Giants got it to get out of that hole. If there was a team that they'd jump, I would say it's Washington. But even Washington with Taylor Heineke looks like they can compete against a lot of teams. Imagine if they put a halfway decent quarterback there. We'd see the difference in rosters to where the Giants would be the worst, unfortunately. And that's maybe not their fault. A lot of it is, though. The Dave Gettlemans of the world, the Joe Judges, the Jason Garretts, having guys like that to rely on and lead your team, you're asking for failure. All respect due to those guys, but that combination has not worked. It continues not to work, and eventually the Giants are going to have to do something about it. But until then, Giants are my last place team in the NFC East. Detroit Lions, 0-6, NFC North. I'll make this nice and easy. Stand. Lions are going to stay the worst team. They don't even have a win yet, and they're already 3 games out of third place. Now, for reference, you have the Chiefs, who are 1 game out of first place, and they're in last place in their division. The Lions are 5 games out of first, and they're 3 games out of second, and 3 games out of third. The Detroit Lions are going to stay in last place in the NFC North. I think that's an easy take to make. Lock me in. Stand. NFC South. Atlanta Falcons 2-3. They're a game behind the Panthers. They're a game and a half behind the Saints. And they're 3.5, somewhere around there behind the Tampa Bay Bucks. I'm going to say stand again. I think the Atlanta Falcons finish as the worst team in that division. And the only way they don't is if the Panthers continue to lose more and more players to injury. But in 2 more weeks, maybe McCaffrey's back. He'll steal them a few more wins if they don't already steal a few more wins in the meantime. Falcons will win next week, I think, like I said, against the Dolphins, but they're going to have to play teams like the Saints and Bucks and those teams again. Those are all losses, I think. I don't think they can hang with those teams. I'm going to say stand. Falcons finish last in the NFC South. Last division, and probably the hardest division to predict, to assess, and to make takes on, the NFC West. The last place team by a half game is the Seattle Seahawks. Now, my friend Blaze and I have had a good discussion and debate about this NFC West. And we both have it half and half on each side. The start of the year, he said that the Seahawks are finished last and the Rams are finished first. I said the 49ers were finished last and the Cardinals were finished first. Right now, he has the last place team correct. I have the first place team correct. It's going to be a battle to see where they all fall at the end of the year. If I didn't spoil it already right there, I'll spoil it right now. I'm going to say hit. I do think that the Seattle Seahawks finish better than the 49ers. Whenever they get Russell Wilson's when they'll string together more wins. But the Seahawks have teams like the Jaguars coming up. And if I'm looking at this from a non-Jaguars perspective, like that, covering up my logo right now if you're listening, I would say that the Seahawks should go in and stomp on the Jaguars, even with Geno Smith. They should have no problems. That should get them right out of that hole in the NFC West. And we should look at what the 49ers got in they still have week 7 to play. And that's where the Saints are playing the Seahawks. That might be trouble for Seattle. And the 49ers play the Colts, which I think the Colts could beat them. 49ers are favorites. They're at home, but there's no reason to think the 49ers are a lock to win that. But when the Jags go and play the Seahawks, the 49ers are actually on a bye week. So they are not going to have a chance that week to capitalize. The Seahawks might. Week after, 49ers play the Cardinals, and the Seahawks have their bye week. So I don't think the 49ers win that game against the Cardinals. I'm going to say hit just because I think the 49ers could finish in last place. Wouldn't be shocked if Seattle does, but I would be shocked if either of those teams finish in second or better, because I think the Rams and Cardinals have the top of that division locked. Should be a fun NFC West finish with whoever wins that division, whoever comes out of it in the playoffs, to instantly be contenders to make a deep run. Final note I do want to make before we head out of here is if you want to have any contributions to this podcast, we want to hear about them. If you have ideas for a segment, if you have ideas for a guest, if you have things that I haven't talked about on a weekly basis that you want me to cover more, whether it's individual stats, whether it's funny moments, whether it's bad plays, whether it's good plays, let me know. Whether that is reaching out to me, messaging me on any social media, whether that's adding this page, Pushing the Pylon on Facebook. Make sure to like and follow the page. And you can reach out right there. Reach us out directly. Let us know what you think. On Twitter, follow Pushing the Pylon. Tweet at us. Retweet the stuff. Contribute. This is your podcast as much as it's mine. I do this for you. I do it for myself because it's fun to just sit in front of a mic and speak to whoever's listening on the other side. Even if it's nobody listening on the other side and I'm talking to myself right now, I love listening to myself. And I know that's a dumb thing to say. I mean it jokingly, obviously. But I really don't mind, I sitting in front of this is a good form of kind of talking about football without taking up someone else's time unless they want it taken up. And they can pause me at any time if you want to stop me right here. And then when you play it, you forget where we're at. So I'm going to talk about bologna sandwiches because that's what we were talking about before you paused it. No, I was just kidding. Imagine if someone paused it there and then they're like, what the hell do bologna sandwiches have to do with week 8 of football? Week 7 of football? I don't know. It has nothing to do with it. I digress. TikTok, as I said, it's at Hauser Media. Hauser Media, you can also follow on all the other social media platforms. We're going to be trying some cool projects with Hauser Media that don't involve Pushing the Pylon after the season. So if you're in other sports, follow Hauser Media as well as Pushing the Pylon. But yeah, Jacksonville Jaguars win a football game. You can't tell me nothing, haters. You can't tell me nothing about how bad my team is. Because guess what? You're as good as your last game. And the Jacksonville Jaguars won their last game. There's a lot of teams this week who didn't win a football game. Let's go through them for my own happiness. The Philadelphia Eagles. The Miami Dolphins. The Chicago Bears. The Detroit Lions. The Houston Texans, the New York Giants, the Washington Football Team, the Carolina Panthers, the Los Angeles Chargers, the Cleveland Browns, the Denver Broncos, the New England Patriots, the Seattle Seahawks, and the Buffalo Bills. None of you could do what the Jacksonville Jaguars did this week, and that's win a football game. Thank you very much. This has been Jim Tannhauser with Pushing the Pylon. As always, see you next time. Take care.